Puxar a brasa a minha sardinha, and welcome to Shift+F1, a podcast about speedy race cars. That, by the way, is Brazilian Portuguese, and I think Portuguese, for pulling the ember to my sardine.
Oh, okay.
To pull one's ember to one's sardine is what you say when you're taking advantage of something that will benefit you. So one might say that Verstappen pulled one too many embers this weekend and somebody else took the sardine. I think that's how that expression goes. Danny?
Yeah.
How are you?
I'm fine. I'll be honest. We've done this podcast for coming up on a decade, and we've gone through a lot of idioms. This is the one that's maybe confused me the most, but also I'm okay with that. You know, some things are better left in mystery. It makes the world a much more interesting and textured place.
Speaking of mysteries, Rob Zachney is joining us. How are you, Rob?
Not bad. Man, I hate it when my ember sets my sardine alight, and I realize I just pulled the ember too close to that sardine.
It's a famous Greek myth, I think, about a man who put his ember too close to his sardine.
And his wings were wax.
Yes.
If you're new to this podcast, a very warm welcome. And if you're new to Formula One itself, we've got an episode just for you. It's our preseason primer episode. It assumes no prior F1 knowledge and explains how the sport works and who everybody is. So if you'd like to go back and listen to that, it's episode 257. And then you can just binge this whole season and have
especially
a lot of
those, first 4 episodes where we're like telling people to hang on tight because it's going to be super boring and uncompetitive, which really just, casts a great light on our analytical prowess.
Listen, anything can happen in Formula One, and it usually does. The show would not be possible without our audience over at patreon.com/shiftf1, where every month we release an ad-free version of this podcast, along with bonus podcasts and videos exclusively for our patrons that cover racing documentaries and films, F1 video games, experiments with other racing series, and a lot of weird things. So if you would like to support the show and get access to all that fun stuff, head over to patreon.com/shiftf1 or click the link in the show notes. So what's going on this month, Danny?
We're going to put the vote to the patrons this month. Tomorrow, by the time this podcast goes up, the post should also be up, or it'll be coming pretty soon afterwards. We're going to be asking them to pick from 3 spooky car-related movies. And the one that gets the most votes will be the one that we review. The 3 movies are Duel, Christine, and The Hitcher. 3 classics. I don't think I've actually seen any of them.
I've seen Duel.
I've seen chunks of Duel. That's Steven Spielberg's first film.
First film.
Yeah, so, we'll have to...
First feature
It's
length.
weird. He did a car movie as his first film, and so did Lucas. With
I guess
American
right.
Graffiti is,
Pretty much. Could not be more different.
They could not be more different.
They're pretty different, yeah.
You're right. They're also very different. Who knew that one of them would go on to make action schlock and the other one would go on to make interesting, plot movies with, interesting characters and, how they evolve throughout them.
Do you just call Star Wars action schlock?
Hey, have you seen episode 2? Have you seen episode 3? Hey, look, we're all friends here, and our best friends are... This is how it works, right? That's the parasocial sauce. We're going to sprinkle all over this thing, slosh it up. Our amazing title sponsors, who, you know what? Considering it's Halloween and it's spooky and topsy-turvy, I'm going to read them in reverse order, just to mess with everyone's head. Here we go. Jason Kelly, Samurai Love Story, Lachlan the Maddened Man, Irvine Clinical Research, William Rump, Troy Stammer, Circuit Demon, Max Voltar, Alex Goucher, Snigs, Bunny Fiend, The Space Above Us Podcast, Abraham Getchell, Jason Chadwick, Abdullah Althani, Bailey Foote, Drew Stewart, FTC, telemetrydeck.com, Olivia Evans, at Talking Autos, Gordy's Army, Michael Maves, at Team Blackjack. This is really hurting my brain. So it's like reading my telephone number backwards or something. It just doesn't feel right. Cyphus Training, Turf SCS, Agave ATX, Get Rich or Die Ryan, and It's a Me Ferrario. Thank you all so much for supporting
our the F1 nonsense. History book is going to have something about it looked like a horribly fatal accident on this date, but all drivers were pulled unscathed from their cars.
Hopefully. Although that would not be very spooky. Hopefully we'll get something super spooky.
But it would be the perfect inversion now that you have just turned it into upside down land.
Upside down land.
Which maybe we're already there because Max got a penalty for racing over the line.
Fucking, I was thinking the exact same thing. I'm so glad you said that. That was great. Good stuff.
We're also upside down because we're polling the patrons for spooky movies in October, and then we'll be releasing it in November, along with another one in November.
Man, it was a busy. I think, also, I'm just happy to be back where my microphone sounds good. Apologies to everyone for the past 2 months on and off. I was on the road for 6 of the past 8 weeks, so, I'm glad to be back. Just in time for the end of the season.
Well, speaking of weird inversions, let's get to the grid for the Mexican Grand Prix. We got a lot to get to, so let's just jump right in here. Carlos Sainz Jr. on top of the grid. First pole of the season by over 0.2 of a second. Fun quote here from Sainz on Race Fans about the racing line that he took out of the final corner to the finish line, where he kind of hugged the inside line to cross near the flag stand instead of out near the normal line. Quote, "It's just a Lando thing that he normally likes to do. I think it's from iRacing or something."
Oh, funny.
He likes doing a short distance to the line, and I said, well, I lose nothing. Maybe it's faster cutting a bit the distance. Maybe it gives me 1,000 or 2,000ths of a second. I'm going to make sure this time I don't leave them out there. I remember from our McLaren days, he used to do it a lot, and I was a bit puzzled. So, video games are real life. Second place is Max Verstappen. And in third is Lando Norris. Big floor update this weekend for him. He says that he could have beaten Verstappen if he had had a clearer run in qualifying. Charles Leclerc lines up fourth ahead of George Russell, who crashed in free practice 2. That's a lot of crashes for George Russell this season. Lewis Hamilton in 6th, Kevin Magnussen 7th, Pierre Gasly 8th in the Alpine. Alex Albon lines up 9th. Scary crash from him in free practice 1 where he lost control and clipped Oliver Behrman in the Ferrari, who was out there with a bunch of the other rookies for their practice day. A funny thing to note about that is that during the double waved yellows that resulted, another rookie who was out there, Robert Schwartzman in the Sauber, overtook Tsunoda, which is a no-no under double waved yellows. The stewards then handed Schwartzman a 5-place grid penalty, despite the fact that he has not entered in an F1 race.
Does he get to keep that for his debut, or does that get wiped off for the...
I think it probably does not carry over to the following race.
Yeah, next season, I'm sure they wipe the slate clean on that. But yeah, that's pretty funny.
Yeah. 10th place, Nico Hülkenberg, 2 Haas cars starting in the top 10. Then we've got 11th, Yuki Tsunoda. He crashed at the end of Q2, bringing out the red flag and ending the session and scuppering a lot of runs. The Britishisms, they work their way in there.
Way to, interesting that both Albon and Tsunoda crashed before the race. I'll just make that note. Yeah.
Liam Lawson, the other RB, lining up just behind Tsunoda in 12th. He claims he could have easily made Q3 if not for Tsunoda's crash.
I could have easily made Q3.
Yeah, me too. Fernando Alonso
with my eyes closed.
in 13th, followed by Stroll, Bottas, Franco Colapinto, Oscar Piastri. Had a time deleted after dragging the floor over a curb. And after that, his times were not fast, so that may have been the cause. He will start 17th, ahead of Sergio Perez, the hometown hero. Also not very fast. He got knocked out in Q1 in Mexico for the first time in his career, citing issues with the brake. Not that there was a problem with the brake, but just that he became unable to stop the car when he wanted to.
Interesting, because I was watching a great side-by-side of him and Verstappen's lap times. I think it was 0.8 was the difference between the two of them. And you could see that he was braking a little bit more than Verstappen, but mostly he wasn't carrying as much speed through the fast corners, and that was what was catching him out. So, obviously, look, a mechanical problem you're having, or an issue with your car and how you're engaging with it can, appear with problems in lots of different ways. But yeah, it just seems like he wasn't as confident in the high speeds.
Yeah. I don't know about you. That is a recurring nightmare for me, is my brakes don't work in my car.
Oh, really? Yeah. My recurring nightmare is that the frogs come back, and I shit you not. Today, October 29th, for the first time in about 7 months, I can hear one right outside the door. So
really? They were waiting.
They were
for
waiting,
the start of the pod.
They were waiting, and let's cross our fingers, and then the next hour it does not turn into a chorus. So,
Zhou Guan Yu 19th and Esteban Ocon 20th. Actually, he'll start from the pit lane because he's got some new power unit elements. Danny, do you want to take us through the start of the Mexican Grand Prix?
I sure do. So Verstappen's in second position, and it's the dirty part of the track, but it crucially on this counterclockwise circuit. Clockwise circuit? Clockwise circuit. Yes. The first turn is a right-hander. And honestly, if I was Max Verstappen, I would want to be in second position here.
Yeah.
Because if there's one thing he's good at doing, it's retaining the inside of a turn and making sure that the other driver doesn't get a look in around the outside. That is exactly what happens. Max, we know, is great at starts. He had a great start this time as well. Pretty much immediately was side by side with Sainz, had his nose out in front by the time they got down to the braking zone. Takes turn one and leaves Sainz absolutely no room. He eventually, or pretty much right away, has to drive all the way across the grass. Because of this, Max just does the whole... Max is really good at this because, and we've talked about this, we'll talk about it later, and what we talked about last week, is that there used to be this thing where you would drive somebody else off the racing line, off the track rather, and he did this last week as well with Lando at Circuit of the Americas. There used to be this thing, I remember, about 10-15 years ago, where the stewards would look at the onboard telemetry and they'd see that somebody didn't turn in. Not that they couldn't, that they didn't. And one thing I've noticed with Max in recent laps is that what he does is really good, is that he brakes so late that he can't turn in. So he almost creates the problem that solves the problem for him. Which I find, I mean, it's just another sign of his good or his racing skill. Perhaps also says something about his sportsmanship, or at least his, the lack of the rules as the current rule set's ability to enforce proper quote unquote sporting quote unquote racing. But anyway, it was a really good start from Max. He earned the corner. Sainz joined the racetrack ahead of him, but basically immediately gave the place back. The only other thing that happened was a fracas behind an incident involving Albon and Tsunoda, which was partially because of Gasly's motion in the back of the field. Basically, Tsunoda had a great start, went up the outside, was really hugging the outside of the track, trying to keep it out of the grass on the first part of it, and then Albon is sort of like watching him in his mirrors, and he's giving him space. He's giving him just enough space, but then Gasly, who knows Albon's there but doesn't know that there's a Yuki Tsunoda on the other side of him, starts to defend by sort of slightly squeezing out Albon, and unfortunately he was just the meat in a sandwich. Collected Tsunoda's tire immediately came off, which wasn't awesome to see, and Albon also suffered a broken wishbone or something, some part of the
car launched and floated 3 feet off the ground the entire way down the wall to the end of the before it hit the sort of barrier at the end of the runoff area. Kind of spooky crash, right? It's easy to imagine that if that car gets a little more lift, you have one of those. Usually those are not this necessarily the scariest accidents, because sometimes the most dramatic stuff is the ones people just walk away from. But you can imagine that car just doing one of those barrel rolls.
Like Alonso in Melbourne. Remember
that's exactly where my head went. Yep.
Yeah. So you're right. Thankfully, whatever way the car turned in, it came back down again. But Albon couldn't even make the turn. His front right, I think it was. No, it must have been his front left. Couldn't make it. Gasly drove away. Nobody. This is one of those nobody's fault. I think Yuki was making a risky play, but look, he had a good start. If Gasly knew that the other guy was there,
Albon was such a sitting duck.
Yeah, 100%. Like I felt bad for him more worse than anyone. Yeah, and Gasly was maybe trying to move over a bit, but he's trying to get a good entrance into that turn. It's a pretty tight right-hander.
I kind of feel like he's not even like he's not really in there. You know what I mean? Like I don't think he's seeing it as like I've got Albon on the outside because they both come up on him really fast outside him. So it's like he kind of feels like he was just there. And starting to make his own corner entry, and then like his wobble to make the entry to the corner just triggered the chain reaction. But I was glad that there was a no call on that. It's like
totally
classic racing incident. There's really not a lot you can expect from people here other than do exactly what they did.
This was one of the most blameless 3-car crashes I've ever seen. It was just like unlucky.
We do get a safety car for that. Also, Sergio Perez being investigated for being out of position, or they say it for a false start, and then the Sky crew are looking at the replay and surmising that he might have been out of position. He did earn a 5-second penalty. Am I remembering that right?
But he pulled over the yellow line, right? That was it.
Yeah,
was it?
I think so.
Yeah.
Just another notch on a pretty terrible weekend for Checo in his home race.
Yeah. On the restart, Sainz sticks with Verstappen, and as we hit lap 9, it is his turn to be late on the brakes, and he dives up the inside of Verstappen, has to correct, this is at turn 1, and then has to correct at turn 2 to avoid cutting too much of the corner. Bounces over the curb, but keeps the place through turn 3 and on to the next straight, which he has DRS for, while Verstappen does not, which is a fun quirk of this track.
Yeah, double detection on that one.
Sainz doesn't quite pull away, and this allows Norris, who's in third, to pull up close to Verstappen and then try to get him around the outside of turn 4. And this time, folks, it's pretty cut and dry. Norris is clearly way ahead at the apex, is on a trajectory to make the corner, and Verstappen just does not brake, meaning that Norris can't turn in without crashing into him. So he has to bail off track again, cuts the corner, and comes out ahead of Verstappen. So I'll just continue on this.
Yeah, you might as well.
This chain of events here. As they head into turn 7, then Verstappen does the same thing, except arguably even more egregiously. Again, he basically doesn't brake, causing his car to go careening off of the track in front of Norris, who again has to avoid. Leclerc takes advantage of this and speeds by into second while these two are, in another zip code. Verstappen, though, stays ahead of Norris this time, but it's not long before 2 10-second time penalties come his way, one for each of these corners. So 20 seconds worth of penalties for Verstappen. Unfortunately, he has no reason to give the place back to Norris because he's been penalized already. And instead, Norris is just stuck behind him for 15 laps until Verstappen pits, which really hurts his chances of chasing down the 2 Ferraris. Let's go with Danny first. Yeah. What do we want to say about this?
Yeah, I mean, okay, let's talk about the second incident first, because it's one of the most cut and dry 10-second penalties I've ever seen. It's just a completely deranged move by Max Verstappen trying to, like, he's not trying to, you can't overtake going that speed on that turn. Like, he's basically, he's F1 rage quitting to me in that moment.
Yes, and it made me wonder, is he, because he's this, like, is he thinking of the championship at this point? Because he's this many points ahead of Norris, is he daring Norris to crash?
So that's the thing, is that, like, the cut and dryness of this is that, like, he deserved the 10-second penalty. It was insane what he did. Are we putting on a conspiracy hat, or is this genuine? Is this a genuinely fair critique of that incident? Yes, you do immediately think of, like, Senna and Prost, or, Schumacher, and there have been championships won this way. I don't think necessarily that's going on. I think he has a rush of blood to the head, but I do think that there is a universe. Thankfully, it's not our universe, but there's a universe in which they crashed. And if they crashed and Lando was on the outside of that turn, he's going straight into a wall at, top speed, basically. So I think the thing that isn't talked about too much here is that, like, Verstappen is never making that corner. So he knows he's going, like, there's no, in a month of Sundays, he is not going to be able to, he's behind Lando. He's not going to be able to overtake him and brake fast enough for that. He knows that. Everyone knows that. And crucially, Lando knows that. He's watching him in his mirrors clearly to see if he does it. And he does. And Lando, thankfully, was able to avoid the incident. If Lando turned into that corner and Max dive bombs down the inside, then he's not going to collect and go in the direction of the turn. He's going to bounce right off him like a pinball and go straight into almost like a flush wall Grosjean style. So that's the part that bothered me, was that, like, sure, you can have a rush of blood to the head and you can, almost take somebody out, but, like, nobody thinks they're crashing there. That's not like that just has some tech pro that's about 40 yards from the edge of the turn. That's not set up for people to be having high speed crashes like the end of turn one that has this big, long, runoff crash area where Tsunoda manages to get picked up. So that to me was the part where I was not happy with Verstappen. I don't think he was doing it on purpose to try and take them out for the points. I don't think he wants to win a championship that way, but I do. I
don't think he's trying to crash into him, and I don't think he's. I think he's doing the Senna thing of giving Lando the option, and basically daring him to come at me, bro. What do you think, Rob?
Yeah, I think Dan makes a really good point. Like, you can see when the aerial shot really highlights the degree to which the crash that was being risked there is not one that they've profiled the corner for, because it is simply like they assumed quite rightly that no one is going to be straight lining off at that speed, that far off the line, and flirting with that wall. It did feel like a red mist descending type moment, because it had been such argy-bargy racing for a few corners now, and Max was trying to stay in there for a podium fight. But that doesn't necessarily excuse it, right? Like, the red mist descending is actually arguably worse. That it's not a calculated, like, I'm giving you the option to bail out of this. It is just putting the foot down and not turning the wheel is not what you really want to see. But I was really surprised, first of all, that the stewards stepped in. We'll get into after the race, like, what's happened between here and Austin to sort of change how these things are adjudicated. But I was surprised that they actually did step in fast and then brought, like, the real penalties out to address this, because the thing you pointed out, Danny, is exactly why I still think, like, people driving Max do need to make peace with the fact that, like, if he knows you're going to be the person who backs off, he will always have that edge and he will force you to back off again and again. But the stewards and the rules need to be there so that you are not putting drivers in a place where, again, to quote Ferrari, fuck it, we both die, is like an actual outcome for the kind of racing that is being, like, had at the front. Furthermore, it's just not, we can kind of see, you can always do this to someone in a corner. You can always just hold the line, put in a little steering wheel input, not nearly enough to make the corner, hold it, force them out, and then, force the position to come back to you, or have them sort of undo the entire battle for position that unfolded. Kind of sucks. We saw it at Austin. It kind of would nullify what could have been side-by-side duels repeatedly. Here again, Norris and Verstappen knocked wildly out of position, and at that point, nobody's immediately, like, here, Norris doesn't even think about giving the position back. I was maybe thinking heading into 7, he was toying with the idea of giving it back, but then I heard the radio message where he's like, this guy's dangerous. Like, I'm just trying to avoid crashing with him. And yes, all these things are a little bit for public consumption, but it was clear here that now the racing that is happening is like, we'll just go elbows out on the track, and then we'll see how the refs call it in the aftermath, which is not the most. That ain't the show, right? It kind of sucks to be watching a race and be like, well, we'll see what VAR tells us in a few minutes.
Yes. Yeah. And I think, and this is my biggest criticism of Verstappen against other people, is that it's Max who's predominantly doing that. He is doing things that he knows are within the rules. And last week 2 weeks ago in Austin, he just barely didn't step over the line. And this past weekend, he just barely change the line. Did step over the line. And 100% the thing everyone's saying is we have to change the line. Nobody's looking at these defenses and saying this is good racing. Like, it just sucks. I'm not going to blame the guy for doing it because, look, the rules are the rules and it's hard racing and stuff. I mightn't like the mentality and ethos and sportsmanship behind it, but then I'm not a multi-world championship winning Formula 1 driver, so who cares what I have to say about it. But the thing that, like, if you were to show the Coda situation in this turn to the same person and say, now, one person got penalized 10 seconds and then on the other race they didn't, they'd have a hard time squaring that particular circle. Look, the difference this time around was Lando. The difference was that Lando was more aggressive. Was that he knew that if he's going to win that fight, he knows what Max is going to do. Unfortunately, he knows that he's going to brake late, which means that he won't, sort of curiously won't be able to make the turn, and then will force him out. So what Lando did was made fucking sure that this time he went over the apex, he was in front. That's what he did.
Real quick, I'm just curious, because I had this thought. If only one of those incidents happened, does Max get hit this hard? Because the two incidents happened side by side. And I was stunned when the first 10-second penalty came through. And you already done something maybe arguably more egregious on the next set of corners. But the degree to which I feel like the first thing, I was like, it feels like it's going to be a repeat of Austin. Yeah. And then you have the proverbial, like, caught on film holding up a gas station type moment, and it's like, okay, now you're kind of forcing the issue now, right? Like the first one, maybe you could have pretended, well, it's tricky to judge how things go in these corners, and then like the rage out in the next corner complex was such a clear, you're gonna have to do something about this. This is, the officials are gonna have to separate the teams.
Yeah. In both instances, in both two corners, looking at these two corners back to back and Max's behavior, but also because of Coda, all we had done all week was adjudicate this one turn. So it was basically like the entire court now was in session. Everyone was watching, and he did it again. And this, so. We
and it's all 2021 shit. It's all
100%.
So you have the sections of the grid and the fan base still like bearing this, like, he was never brought to justice for his many crimes. Right. And there were no crimes for a couple years, and it's like, man, he's really reformed his behavior. racing with absolutely no one around him battling for position, and it's like, let's just see who he is when it comes back down to it. And what do you know?
I am disappointed because I'm still hoping that this is just him being, I don't know.
I'm with you. They should have arrested him. What? Sorry, what were you going to say?
I guess what am I saying? I had a thought there, and then I just remembered that Charles Leclerc's drink was broken and he was getting waterboarded for those first few laps.
Wait, what? Really?
Did you hear that?
No.
His drink. He came on the radio and he sounded like he was underwater, and he was talking. He said it was during the safety car when he was like shaking the car back and forth. He said, "Whenever I rock the car, the water won't stop." So he was getting.
I'm drinking when I don't want to.
Yes. So he was waterboarding himself while he was trying to keep the tires hot. So so that's fair play to him. I think. What do I think? I think what's the most telling about Max's temperament when it comes to these things is his interviews after the race, where at least he wasn't doing the thing he was doing years ago where he was saying, like, this is ridiculous, blah, 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 blah. He says he disagrees with the first one, yada, yada. And then when they ask him about 7, which is the most, he hasn't got a leg to stand on for turn 7. He says, it is what it is. That's what he says. Now, that coming from Max, that's pretty good. But if you talk to anyone else on the grid, I suspect there would be a level of contrition that we're just not used to seeing from Max. And I think it was telling that even in that moment where he had clearly lost his head and done something outside of the rules and had cost his team points, that he still wasn't able to just, man up and admit it. He was like, it is what it is. And
they're still doing over the radio.
That was disappointing.
When he's told he gets the 10-second penalty, he's like, wow, that's actually kind of impressive. And
GP was being just the most arrogant. Like,
there was a lot of whinging. On the
they're
radio.
whining again.
I hate
like,
you,
what do you do,
guys? I hate you, phony bastards. Like, this is the most run to the headmaster ass team, and they get one ruling against them, and it's like, well, I suppose if you're just going to whinge about it, fuck off, you public school bitch.
Well, on that note, we're going to come back to that a little later, and we're going to come back to the rest of this race right after this ad break. All right, everybody. Great
time for an ad break right after.
Real quick, public schools in England are a different thing. They're kind of the private schools in England. It's a weird thing.
Yes. All right, so our focus now shifts to Mercedes. Hamilton is in 5th, followed by Russell. And on lap 15, Russell gets a run on Hamilton with DRS down into turn 1. Hamilton defends to the inside. Russell, though, has enough momentum to go around the outside. They keep it clean through this section, and Russell ends up on top. These two are not done yet, however, and we will come back to them. In the meantime, though, Fernando Alonso retires with something apparently stuck in an intake. Alonso celebrating his 400th Grand Prix weekend.
It was that big digital poster they put over the crowd. I think that got caught in his intake.
We haven't really mentioned the other Red Bull of Perez yet, but on lap 18, after starting from 18th, dive bombs Lawson up the inside of turn 4.
He's like, he does the most like Sergio Perez, like store brand version of Max's strategy. I love it. It's like anything you can do, I can do worse.
Well, and Lawson is showing him no mercy. And this was the like, oh, there's blood in the water. This is like, he's on the outs with his gang. And it's like nobody, he is not protected anymore. Like the other Red Bull drivers are like, anytime we're Sergio, that is an audition. If you're near that man, it is an audition. It is like Russell driving against Bottas, a few years ago.
Yes.
Just like, watch me stunt on this fool.
Yeah. Lawson does a good job of, Perez's move was audacious for sure, but Lawson was then, all right, I'm just going to make your
life
hell for the next couple of turns. And also take a little bit of your side pod out while I'm at it.
Yes. Perez does take some late avoiding action after that, crunching into each other, but he does cede the place back to Lawson. No further action on the matter from the stewards.
Yes.
On the following lap, Stroll tries to get Perez, and Perez puts his car in the same place. This time, Stroll cuts the corner entirely, while Perez takes a wide line for the next corner. And stays ahead. Yeah,
sorry, that was the store brand version of Verstappen's deal because he was defending up on the inside while Stroll was going around the outside. Checo then ran over some debris from his car from the previous incident, which I thought would be a particularly funny way to get a punctured tire, but it didn't happen.
Lap 27 is where Verstappen finally takes his pit stop. The team hovering over his car for 20 seconds. It is an eternity.
Yeah,
I always love when that happens, and 20 seconds just makes it look all the sillier. And while Norris is then thus released to go and chase down the Ferraris, his teammate Piastri is having a tougher time in the middle of the pack. Lap 44, Piastri gets by Gasly for 10th, and a few laps later on lap 56, reaches Hülkenberg in 8th, and with the aid of DRS, does get by down into turn 1. But back to Norris, who has made his way up to DRS range of Leclerc. And just when I thought we were going to get a spicy battle, cut to an aerial shot of Leclerc just losing control out of the final corner, barely collecting the car quickly enough to avoid hitting the wall, but allowing Norris to pass as Leclerc rejoins the track from the dusty runoff. That
man,
brown flag right there.
They talked about it in the green room later. He when he got the snap, he sort of overcorrected it. He also, his rear left barely missed the wall, the little exit that's there. He did a great job saving that one.
We did get some radio shortly thereafter from Norris's pit wall telling him that the wind had picked up, so perhaps that was a contributing factor.
I'll just real quick. I do, because you mentioned it, Danny. Not to put you on blast, because I mean it that way. But also, like, when it happened, everyone's like, "But what a save!" And I hear that a lot, in F1, in IndyCar too. It's like, man, that's incredible. Colton Herta gets this treatment a lot. Like, just incredible car handling. But also, it's like, yeah, he saved it after what might have been a pretty bad, like, if he hadn't saved it, this would not have been a quality incident. It would not have been one of those, look, racers are just they're going to go right up to the edge. This was going around the corner and just losing it. Now, it's trickier than it looks. Rear grip fades, you're putting the power down through that sweeping corner. I get it. But there was a little bit of everyone being like, man, Charles Leclerc, that's why he's a pro, ladies and gentlemen, as he just basically watches the guy who's trying to hunt down his teammate just go whipping past, having put up zero fight whatsoever.
It's like, here, have DRS and I'll get out of the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, you know what? That's a fair point. There is something like, I feel like saving the car from that, like, tank slapper is the closest we get in more modern Formula 1 to drifting. So I think that's why it's just like, ooh, that looks cool. But yeah, that's a fair point. He basically fixed the problem he created himself.
Norris now has about 8 seconds between him and Sainz with about 8 laps to go. So he's got I believe he has newer tires though. Back to Mercedes again. This time it is Hamilton giving chase to Russell, who has a damaged front wing. This has continued for many laps by this point. But on this lap, Hamilton gets around with DRS and gets around the outside of Russell into turn 1. Hamilton moves up into 4th, but he's still over 30 seconds behind Leclerc in 3rd, who takes the opportunity to pit for a new set of tires and goes for the fastest lap.
I think Verstappen's back up to 6th, we should mention, around this stage. He had a couple of places to make up there after his pit stop.
It's around this time also that Lawson and Colapinto get into it down at turn 2. Colapinto going up the inside, Lawson turning in and damaging his front wing. The stewards then handed Colapinto a 10-second penalty, but that did not end up changing his position at the end of the race. In the end, Lando could not chase down Carlos Sainz, who gets his 4th win in Formula 1. Charles Leclerc rounding out the podium with that fastest lap. Then we've got Lewis Hamilton 4th, George Russell 5th, Max Verstappen in 6th place. After the race, was also handed 2 penalty points on his license. If you accrue 12 and 12 calendar months, you must sit out a race like the 7th place finisher, Kevin Magnussen, did.
7th place for Magnussen. Amazing.
That's right.
Real quick, we'll also just note, Piastri is like the man who wasn't there.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
And the only time I thought of him was when McLaren was like, time to go hunt down Max. At a point in the race where it was very clear he was not going to be hunting down Max. It was like, are you a bad enough dude to take 5 seconds a lap out of Max Verstappen?
He's just wedged between 2 Haas's, feeling happy about it.
He finished 8th. Nico Hülkenberg finished 9th. And that's double Haas points for Gene's team. Pierre Gasly finishing in 10th place for the Alpine. Then we've got Stroll, Colapinto, Ocon, Bottas, Zhou, Lawson, and Perez, the classified finishers. The DNFs were Alonso, Albon, and Tsunoda.
Worth mentioning, Liam Lawson got fastest lap mostly as a byproduct of him having to pit, not the AlphaTauri trying to take Lando Norris's fastest lap away again, which was technically what happened. He got it off of Norris. But my favorite incident of the day, just to round off a particularly turgid weekend for Checo Perez, was him changing for tires to try and get the fastest lap on the last race. and failing to do so because he just did a bad lap. So.
I mean, he had that side pod damage too.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah. All right. Well, speaking of penalties, Danny, let's take it to the news here as we get set for Brazil. What's going on?
Yeah, so, I mean, Verstappen was frustrated with the car all weekend. They couldn't just get the tires in the spot they wanted to prior to the race, and it sort of didn't help them then on the day. One reason for this may be because the current engine he's running, while it doesn't have any actual problems necessarily, it just maybe has too many miles on it, and it's not operating within the window they need it to. Helmut Marko said, "We were nowhere near the two front teams, and I guess part of the problem is that Friday we couldn't drive because of our engine problems. So they are going to be swapping out an engine for him. He has already used his allotted engines for the season, so there's a high... I mean, if he does do it, Verstappen is essentially going to take a grid penalty to the race on Sunday in Interlagos, which, you know, in a race where he came sixth and Lando came second, he lost some points there, and you know, every little helps. Interlagos is a track I think he can probably make up places pretty good, but if his car isn't doing particularly well with the new engine, then that grid penalty is not going to help him much.
Yeah. A couple kind of quick hits here, all surrounding Sergio Perez and the rumors of his replacement for 2025, are sort of reaching a fever pitch. It sounded from the Sky broadcast that it's kind of an open secret that that Lawson will get the drive. I don't know if judging from like reading headlines, it doesn't seem it's that dire yet, but should remind people he does have a contract for next year. Sergio Perez does with Red Bull. But sometimes there are performance clauses in the contract. And I gotta believe that the fact that they are now, let's just check here. Yes, third place in the constructors standings.
Yes. There was a performance clause in, remember, before the summer break. So that means there almost assuredly is for the end of the season. Yeah, because that's when we were talking about Ricciardo taking that seat. Remember that? Remember we were talking about Ricciardo getting his Red Bull seat back?
Yeah.
What a weird year this has been.
Yeah. So a couple of rumors here. A weird one. Piastri.
Oh boy.
To Red Bull is a weird one. This apparently coming from Helmut Marko. Piastri says it wouldn't be a weekend in F1 without some comments from Helmut.
Is that what Piastri said?
Yes.
What a legend.
Yeah, I don't even know what Marco said here. The other rumor is Colapinto to RB. RB doesn't have. They have not confirmed whether Lawson will race for them in 2025. Certainly, Ricciardo is not. So they don't currently have a 2025 driver. The thinking,
well, they have
you would
Sonoda.
Assume that. Sorry,
Sonoda has a contract for next year, I think.
Yes, sorry, they don't have the second seat.
Second one, yeah.
One would assume that, well, their current driver would just roll over, but that won't be the case if Lawson gets Perez's seat. So they will need someone else. So the rumor is Colapinto to go in there. The other thing happening here is that Tsunoda is finally getting a Red Bull test, which he has never gotten. He's been apparently promised it for some time. But after the final round in Abu Dhabi, Red Bull will be giving Tsunoda a test in a Red Bull. He says, I kind of got used to how difficult it was to get even a single day of testing when I am outperforming most of the teammates previous years. But yeah, there are probably things that I didn't really know about, something going on around the background that I don't know. And for sure, at the same time, there's probably the view that I'm not really able to improve as much as they wanted at this level, especially for radio communications. So he doesn't really know what's going on. But there's a lot of moving pieces out there, and we have not had any confirmation one way or the other about Sergio Perez or who is going to be in that seat in 2025.
Glad Yuki is getting a look in. I think I've talked enough about how look, maybe they recognize he's got a low ceiling. I could appreciate that. I don't think Yuki is a generational talent or anything, but I do feel like the cultural issue there is probably something that Red Bull are particularly sensitive to. It's a very nice way of saying that they're a bit racist. I don't know. It's I just I mean he's talking about the radio stuff as well as it as if that maybe is part of it. I think it's a shame that he is overlooked, and I think you can probably look at something systematic as to why he is overlooked. He has outperformed a lot of his teammates, but like I said, he's not. It's not like he's some uncut gem that they're going to be able to turn into a champion or anything.
He outperformed people who crashed on the launch pad at RB. I think is kind of the issue, right? Like De Vries went spectacularly poorly. And then Daniel, just a real misfire once he came back from that injury. So I think if you're going from
because
it looked rough when he started out. I'm not sure what the final score was with him and Gasly, but I feel like Gasly was like firmly the senior, he was the senior driver.
Yeah, he was
probably the better one. And so here, Lawson is we're kind of seeing the first we saw a little bit last year. And it was ambiguous who is the stronger driver overall. Yeah. And so I do think there's a bit of, in that car, in that position, it's kind of tough to fully know what you've got. So like Yuki, I think it's fair to, I understand why there's some questions about the value of his, head-to-head with teammate performance to date, because he's had he's had two outliers. As teammates.
Yeah, fair.
Rob, final news story here regarding what we were talking about earlier. Max Verstappen and his racing.
The rules.
Yeah, so this started to bubble up basically immediately following Austin. Some discussion about whether or not the sort of sporting regulations regarding, in particular, overtaking and defensive corners is in the right place. And so there was this discussion between the two races about whether or not that, like, first of all, do the rules need to be revised, how they're being judged, does that need to be changed? And then the initial thing that was being pitched, I think by the FAA, was this discussion about next year's rule set. And there was a real move to speed up implementation and get some clearer rules out the door by Qatar. However, it sounds like things actually began to change even before this race rolled off with the drivers' meeting with the stewards. Like after the Formula 2 race, there was apparently a meeting where they really hashed out some stuff about how they wanted these corner incidents to be judged. And Russell, from his position as like the head of the GPDA, Grand Prix Drivers Association, was coming out of that meeting saying that there was some movement, even then, to start adjusting how they were calling these things.
Right.
Crucially, Max getting those 10-second penalties was not actually a new thing. 10 seconds. Remember, it used to be 5 seconds, and then everyone could see that it was so easy to put 5 seconds on someone once you had track position. They upped it to 10. I think because Russell also had done that a couple times. And so they adjusted it to 10. Then he just got, he had the two incidents that people felt was pretty egregious. But yeah, there's a rush now to revise how they're assessing these incidents in the corners, and to get some clear lines laid down before the series heads to the Middle East.
Yeah, there was one line I saw in an article during the week where there was a line in one of the regulations with regards to defending a corner and forcing someone off, that if you also did not make that corner, then you didn't have the right to retain that position, and that line had been taken out of just that instance of if you're on the inside defending. It still applied if you're anywhere else forcing a driver off the track or something. And so that apparently people are saying might be the line that gets reintroduced, or there might be some other language somewhere else.
Hey, just a last thought. Also, it's just the way Max has been driving lately, and just the difficulty of assessing teammates, and like not to be like the Checo defense force here. It's possible that car sucks now. Like they're kind of like, you know what I mean? Like that, like they're not the second best car on the grid. They're probably not the third best car on the grid. Like it's you start getting it's starting to look like there's some real damage control being put down. And you know, if you think about where Max sort of got the reputation for being really sharp elbowed, it was when he was sort of fighting uphill with a Red Bull was starting to come into its performance. But like the knowledge that once the race drives away from you, it's just gone. It's kind of irretrievable. And so that's the other thing I think hanging in all this is the Red Bull is kind of on the arc of the season falling through the pack, and week after week Max is like trying to defend its position, even though it, like water, wants to find a much lower level. Right. And I think that is also going to contribute to some of the real edgy driving, because once these positions are gone, they're not coming back with the pit cycle. They're just lost.
If that's a fair point and an interesting point. I think one of the things that struck me sort of retroactively looking back at the rest of the season, because there was clearly a moment at which the car did start to fall back, and Verstappen might not be the best canary for that particular coal mine. If you go back and look at Perez's results, the last time he was in the top 5 was round 7. So, sorry, 6. So he was second, 5th, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and he has not he in fairness retired from 2 of these, but otherwise has not been in the top 5.
Oh, it's been the challenge of assessing Max's teammates.
Yeah. So the interesting thing we were saying before a month ago was whether or not they'd lose the constructors. Now the interesting thing is, will they manage to come second? Like they're third at the moment, and the Ferrari has one line of trajectory, and the Red Bull has the other. And as Rob said, turning that thing around is no easy task. So yeah, I don't think they're going to be worrying about Mercedes. There's a decent gap there, but
the catering budget is about to explode.
Oh my God, could you this is bad. This is like,
yep.
This is getting it turned from a season that we all thought that they were going to cruise into one that is kind of a bit of an embarrassment now. If they come third in the constructors and Max is, it seems crazy, but he might still be under threat for the drivers' championship. I think he's definitely got most of the
one DNF and a good result from Norris changes how this whole thing feels, though.
It should be easy, but the fact that it's not, the fact that it's every week, even last week when he managed to get him on points, it's still possible is so telling of how much that car is struggling. Must be struggling. So yeah, good point.
Well, let's take it from the hot desert of Austin,
Mexico?
Texas, to the high desert of Mexico City, to the South American continent. Listen, it's late.
The wet lakes, and we're going to be between them.
The wet lakes.
We're an hour into this podcast. Brazil, Danny, take us there.
The scene of another Max crime.
Which one? I'm trying to think.
No, 2021. This was where he runs Hamilton fully off the track.
Oh yeah.
And there's no penalty, and then Hamilton just has to come back and win the race.
Yeah. Hey, look, there's been some great races here. 1991, Senna winning. Finally, Interlagos in his 8th season. His car's stuck in 6th gear. His shoulders barely work. If you watched the trailer for that new Senna Netflix series, which went up earlier today, you would have seen him.
Oh.
The actor representing Ayrton Senna doing the famous trying to lift the trophy while his arms are basically buggered. 2008 was the infamous first World Championship for Lewis Hamilton, having scuppered it himself, with a terrible ending to the season. 2007, Interlagos, of course, used to be the final race of the F1 calendar, was for a decent amount of time. Definitely in my childhood brain, that's where it often ended. crazy scenes. Nicole Scherzinger out on the running through the garage. Felipe Massa's pit going ballistically happy until somebody says, no, Timo Glock fucked us. All because Hamilton managed to overtake Timo Glock on the penultimate corner because Glock had his tires were basically shot. So pretty crazy. And until 2020 was the craziest ending that happened. 2021, sorry, was the craziest ending that happened probably in F1 history. Wait, 2020, which one was it? Was it 2020? Which was the year?
2021.
21 was okay. 2012, Vettel became triple world champion in an amazing race. This was the one where it was down to him and Alonso. Vettel and Alonso both were neither of them were in front. They were scrambling their way through the pack. Alonso was in third. Vettel was trying to get his way back through. I think it was Hamilton and Hülkenberg had a crash, and that basically gave Vettel 2 more places, and he ended in 7th, winning his third world championship in 2012. Iconic race. And then, of course, the most iconic Interlagos of all time in 2022, where a certain Haas of Kevin Magnussen through as much happenstance as racecraft managed to find himself on pole position to the delight of Gunther Steiner and the rest of the Haas crew. Just a absolute feel-good moment. I'm not sure. I think he was first for maybe 2 turn corners or something, but just a great moment in a great track. Interlagos is brilliant. Like not many people don't like it. It often gives us great races. It's one of the most iconic looking. It's a great one to watch. It's got, for 3 very distinct sections to it. Autodromo Jose Carlos Paz is the name of it. That is a gentleman who he won the first ever Brazilian Grand Prix in 1973 and then tragically passed away 2 years later. So it is named after him. 4.309 kilometers, 2.677 miles, 71 laps. Short lap here, all things considered. So they go
fast
around it
one.
a bunch of times. Yeah, super fast. Like a go-kart track is what they call it. First sector's super fast descent of S's down into a big straight with a decently speedy left-hander at the end of it. Then you're basically into like the sort of infield of Interlagos, which is this very interesting technical low-speed turn part of the track, which Perez is going to absolutely hate. And then climbing back up the hill to get onto the start-finish straight. It's sort of the last 3 turns of this are sort of non-turns because they're just little apexes that you're driving past while your accelerator pedal is scraping the bottom of the floor of the car. So, super fast lap. Often, there's good racing here. The track is good. The runoff is acceptable. There's places you can beach the car. There's obstacles in that respect that you need to sort of be careful. But one of the elements here is the elements.
Very true, Danny. And across the weekend, so first of all, this is a sprint weekend, so we got all kinds of events happening, and the weather is different every day. So temperature,
snow.
Okay. Sprint qualifying on Friday will take place in the afternoon local time, so it'll be mid 70s or low 20s if you're Celsius. Precipitation chance about 14% on sprint qualifying day. That will climb on Saturday for the sprint. We're looking at around 15% at sprint time, and then for qualifying up to potentially 40%. Temperatures a little warmer. We're looking at 24, 23 Celsius or 74, 75 Fahrenheit. Race day, much cooler. We're looking at, let's see, gosh, is that? Yeah, okay, 2 p.m. local. Not so bad. So 74 Fahrenheit, 23 Celsius. Precipitation chance, 75% for race time.
Oh, boy. Let's go.
Yeah. And this is one of those weird microclimate places. So the rain can come and go. Yeah. It can look like it's going to rain. It can just do a little sprinkle. People can freak out and go on wet tires. Exactly. This is why this track rules.
Yeah, this will be... Lando's hopefully not easy. I'm flashbacks to Russia all over again. That year with the rain. Yeah, hopefully. Look, hopefully we get a little bit of the Bernie Eccleston sprinklers this weekend.
That's right. But heading into the Brazilian round, the driver standings look like this. Max Verstappen is on top with 362 points. Lando Norris in second. I'm not going to try to do math. I'll do some math. It is 47 points behind at 315. Charles Leclerc is in third place with 291. Oscar Piastri is in fourth with 251. Carlos Sainz in fifth with 240. Hamilton has 189. Russell has 177. Perez has 150 in eighth place. Then we've got Alonso in ninth with 62. Hülkenberg in 10th with 31. Stroll with 24. Tsunoda with 22. Magnussen with 14. Alex Albon and Daniel Ricciardo are tied with 12 in 14th and 15th place. Pierre Gasly 16th with 9. Then we've got Behrman with 5. Colapinto with 5, also with Esteban Ocon. Lawson has 2, and then Joe, Sargent, and Bottas all have 0. But the constructors is where it's really interesting. McLaren is on top with 566. Ferrari has 537, and Red Bull has 512. Mercedes, and with what is this? 1, 2, 3, 4 races remaining. A lot can happen. Mercedes is in fourth with 366. Aston Martin's in fifth with 86. Gene Haas and team are in sixth place with 46 points. RB's in seventh with 36. Williams has 17 points. Alpine has 14, and Sauber has 0.
Yikes.
Yeah. Whoops, I forgot to open up the fantasy page, so stretch for a minute.
I'll just tell you, you guys want an update on game 4 here?
Yeah.
On the
spoilers for the World Series, I guess.
Yeah, if it's like 12 hours later. The Yankees just got like a 3-run homer after earlier getting their grand slam.
So we're getting to game 5.
11. It's bottom of the 8, and it's 4-11 to the Yankees. So
okay. Yeah.
So, unless this will be great radio.
Oh yeah.
Unless by some miracle the Dodgers are able to scrape back, 8 points, but 7 points. Sorry, I can't do math. But that's not going to happen. ... All
right, I have the fantasy top 3 here from Mexico City. Also, thanks to everyone in Discord who told me how the fantasy league works and how you can get good drivers in there. It's complicated. On the podium, we've got in third place Monty's Rockets. In second, Clean Hands, Dirty Air.
Whoa, I like that.
I like that. And your friend and mine in first place, It's a Me Ferrario. But
the same
overall,
person, I think, is that
perhaps, yeah.
Yeah, who knows?
Overall, though, Lead Bull Racing is in third. That's pretty good.
No truer words have been spoken.
In second place, Alpino Noir, and in first place, Mad Max Mad.
Beautiful. Love it.
If you'd like to join the Fantasy League, you can do so using the link in the show notes. You can also hit us up on the email with shiftf1podcast@gmail.com or f1.cool/emails, or on the socials using the link in the show notes. Danny, that's us around the internet. Do you want to take us around the world?
Let's race around the world. Yeah.
Well, as we get down into the end of the year here, all racing is concluding, so we've got a lot going on. The Craftsman trucks are at the Martinsville Speedway in Martinsville, Virginia for the Zip Buy Now, Pay Later 200.
Love it. Big fan of payday loans. Let's do more of those. Absolutely wonderful.
MotoGP is in Malaysia for the Sepang round at the Sepang International Circuit.
I miss Sepang.
Just want to go back.
I want to go back so bad. I miss her so bad, man. Oh, her and Turkey.
The World Endurance Championship, WEC, is in Bahrain for the 8 hours of Bahrain at the Bahrain International Circuit. The NASCAR Xfinity Series also at Martinsville for the National Debt Relief 250.
That's hilarious. So one of them is payday loans and the other one's National Debt Relief. The fucking circle of life, baby. Jeez, that's great.
We've got Super GT at, it says Mobility Resort Motegi, but we all know.
Hey,
Wikipedia knows.
How many rings that place got?
Count the rings.
It's called Twin Ring Motegi.
Count the rings.
It's a motorsport venue located in Motegi, Tochigi Prefecture.
Beautiful.
We've got the NHRA. They're at The Strip at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. Good name for a drag strip in Las Vegas.
Woo.
And we got NASCAR.
Where are we at?
Also Martinsville for the Xfinity 500.
Oh, that's very boring.
It's not how fast your pipe is. It's the bandwidth.
Oh, that was very good. You should work in marketing.
I should. Let's see. Formula One also happening this weekend. Friday, November 1st, things kick off. Free practice at 10:30 a.m. Eastern time on ESPNU, followed by sprint qualifying on Friday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern on ESPN2. Saturday, November 2nd, the sprint is at 10 a.m. On ESPN2, and race qualifying is at 2 p.m. on ESPN News. But the race, everyone, Sunday, November 3rd at 12 noon Eastern time on ESPN2, The Deuce. And that's gonna be Brazil. Danny, what news from antiquity?
From the Necronomicon. This day, the 1998 season was one of the great year-long battles between two of the greatest rivals the sport has ever seen. Alain Prost and Ayrton Senna, both driving the dominant McLaren Honda, were in great form, but Senna was determined to win his first title at the Japanese GP on this day. Senna had pole but unbelievably stalled at the start and watched as 13 cars shot past him. He managed to bump start the car and set off in pursuit of Prost. The Brazilian needed to win to take the title, and after fighting his way through the field, he took the lead on lap 28, never to surrender it again. Formula One had a new world champion. Everyone should go check out that trailer for that Brazilian Netflix series. The lookalike they have for Alain Prost is staggering. I will say it is very impressive.
I think the Lauda was pretty good too.
The Lauda was good too. And some of the Senna shots were like, I was like, oh yeah, they got his like teeth and all that, like just spot on. Look pretty good. So hey, we'll see if that thing's any good. And hey, look, it was a rough weekend for Max Verstappen. So let's end the week as it started. Just of boss Verstappen was certainly not feeling very bossy today in the year 2000 when he was found guilty of assault by a Belgian court. The charge related to an incident in 1998 when a man ended up with a fractured skull after a fight. The Dutch driver was spared jail and given a suspended sentence. There you go. Just a bit of Max Verstappen lore there for you.
All right.
At the end.
Do we know
Who
what the
amongst
fight was
us,
about?
hasn't had their father assault somebody, fracture their skull, get a suspended sentence? He's done all right considering. He's done pretty good.
Well, as we head into Brazil, Danny, final thoughts here.
What a weird season. Look, man, I'm not to sound like a broken record, and I'm sure people are sick of me. They were happy when the 21 season was over and I could stop getting down off this particular pulpit, but for goodness sake, let's just not have this title be decided by some stupid incident of two cars hitting each other.
Danny,
like that just
you said that before 2021, the last race of 2021, and you cursed everyone.
Look, in fairness, it was Michael Massey. I didn't know that was going to happen. That was
no, but shit
Danny,
like that got in Michael Massey's head. That and his resentment of Toto Wolff and his deep desire to have someone like Christian Horner like him. But primarily, it was we want to make sure we finish it under green. So because Nicky Latifi can't fucking drive despite being in Formula One for like a decade, we end up with this bullshit.
We can all agree that Nicholas Latifi is the one to blame. Okay, how about that?
Final thoughts, Rob.
So the other week, I think Gunther Steiner was doing interviews, and I was thinking about how I would never want to be in a situation where I lose a gig, and it is so clear immediately after that I was the problem. The Haas glow up, the surge, the vertical takeoff through the standings
too. You know?
Toyota. Yeah.
It is powerful. Like Haas things are looking up. They're competing for positions. K-Mag now is sometimes getting more out of the car than Hülkenberg. And it is just the most brutal outcome for, it turns out, having a weird little gnome talking about how shit we all are and then being like, Gene, I fucking hate this team. It turns out that may not have been effective team management.
I will not. You take my wife's name out your mouth. do not speak of my boy. Look, in fair, you're not wrong. They don't look like a bunch of wankers much anymore. Not these days.
He had to get those. He wrote 2 books. He had to get those in.
He's got a lot of spare time. He's got a lot more spare time than he had.
Yeah, before the light burned out here. All right. Well, thanks everyone for listening. Hope you enjoy Brazil. And thanks in advance, Danny and Rob, for holding it down next week. If you would like to support the show and get access to all of our bonus episodes, the ad-free version of the podcast, and the official Shift F1 Discord, you can do so over at patreon.com/ShiftF1. Have a good race weekend, everyone. We will see you all next week.